Chapter 10: America's Economic Revolution. The changing American population. There was a rapid increase in the population because of improved public health and high birth rates. There was also increased immigration, also including internal migration to cities and to the west. The growth of cities was a result of accelerating immigration as well, especially from Germany and Ireland. Men and families went west, while women or people without money stayed east. The reasons for Germans to immigrate included a widening of the rich and poor gap, so they wanted new opportunities. In Ireland, the oppressive English rule and potato famine prompted them to migrate to the US. Benefits of immigration include a source of cheap labor, political strength through their voting. However, with this rise of immigration, there became a rise of nativism, which is advance of native-born people and hostility toward foreigners. The Native American Party was a group not about the Indians, it was a group against immigration and support of nativism. These and other groups came up with the supreme order of the Star-Spangled Banner. The secret password was "I know nothing," so the members became known as the Know-Nothings. These Know-Nothings created the American Party, which only lasted for a brief amount of time. Transportation, communications, and technology. Roads, barges, even steamboats, not enough, so they turned to what is the canal. Funding and construction was up to the state governments, particularly the Erie Canal, which was an engineering triumph and financial success that opened eastern routes to western markets. This was especially helpful for New York. However, other areas were not so successful. There were the beginnings of railroads, such as tracks, steam power, and railroad cars. However, early railroads had erratic schedules. The tracks varied not uniform enough to travel long distances, and many of these early trains wrecked. There was a competition between the railroad and the canals. One would block the other from their transportation. However, there was an accelerated building of railroads in the 1840s and 1850s. The shorter lines were consolidated into longer lines, which allowed them to travel longer distances and connect different regions of the United States. The telegraph provided instant communication between distant cities and United Nations together. The independent lines join in one organization called the Western Union Telegraph Company. The telegraph and railroads were more in the north, connecting the north and the northwest, widening the schism between the north and the south. The rotary press allowed newspapers to be printed rapidly and cheaply. The Associated Press promoted cooperative news gathering. This and the telegraph made collection and distribution of news much faster. Journalism fuels a sectional discord. The North had most of the newspapers, contributing to the Southern sense of subjugation. Commerce and industry. There was a retail distribution of goods. It was increasingly systematic and efficient. Stores began to specialize in different areas. individual merchant capitalist is giving way to the corporation, more big companies rather than individuals. The corporation grew rapidly when legal obstacles to their formation were removed. Limited liability, in which individual stockholders were not responsible for the entire company's losses. There was difficulty of obtaining credit for business investment. Some banks issued banknotes to attempt to solve the problem, but this didn't work very well. The rise of the factory. The New England textile industry was first. All parts of the manufacturing process of textiles was in one location instead of scattered everywhere. These were mostly in the north and northwest, again the south was very behind. Machine technology changed more rapidly in the US than any other country. We did manufacturing of machine tools, often supplying military. There was the turret lathe, which cuts metal parts, and the universal milling machine, which is the chiseling of complicated parts. Now, one of the most important things in developments in this century, this period in time, not century, is interchangeable parts. It started in the gun industry and expanded to many others and made manufacturing much faster and easier. There was new sources of energy like coal moved factories away from the water. This allowed them to expand in more locations than just beside water. However, water still remained the most important source of power during this time period. Merchant capitalists were important in the 1840s, but they were on the decline in the 1850s. There was a realization that greater opportunities for profit. There were greater opportunities for profit in manufacturing than in trade. And the owner of the enterprise is moving away from the individual and the family and toward stockholders. Men and women at work. So there was fertile farmland in the West. Its improvement of transportation and new farm machinery, all of these contributed to a dramatic increase in food production. Less people are needed to work farms. So there was movement from the country to the city. Systems of recruitment to mills. Some whole families moved from the farm to the mill in the Mid-Atlantic area. The Lowell-Waltham system in Massachusetts had young women working in the factories. The labor conditions in America are better than in Europe, than in England, but it is not the best conditions. The transition from the farm to the factory is difficult for some, but it's basically the only option for them. Conditions of work deteriorated over time. The Factory Girls Association was a union demanding reform in their work environment. So, as mentioned before, there's a large and inexpensive source of labor, immigrants. They could perform unskilled work in intolerable conditions for Americans, but the immigrants were tolerated. They worked for very low wages. There was no social pressure to have a decent environment for Irish workers, unlike for native women. So it's easier. You can let the immigrants work in whatever environment you want, but you have to provide good conditions for the natives. Artisans who had been making their own goods to sell, they could not compete with factory-made goods. So they formed the first American labor unions to protect their positions and resist the new economic order. National trade unions, societies for mutual aid among each craft, but these did not go well. There was attempts to limit the length of the workday, but the effects were minimal, even for child labor. The Commonwealth versus Hunt case in the Supreme Court declared that unions were lawful organizations and that the strike was a lawful weapon. Workers are becoming powerful, united, often violent economic and political force in the United States. However, manufacturers could replace the striking workers with immigrants because they were willing to work for lower wages. Patterns of industrial society. There was an increasing gap between the rich and the poor. There is a distinctive culture of wealth emerging among the rich class. While the urban poor are almost entirely without resources. The free blacks in the North did not have much more equality than in the South. However, the absolute living standard of most laborers was improving. Better in the factory than in the farms, I guess. So, there were modest opportunities for movement up the economic ladder. Geographical mobility to the west or from town to town. There was a rapidly expanding middle class when commerce and industry became the source of wealth. Household inventions improved the quality of life for the middle class. Diversification of agriculture. There was a change in the diet. A differentiation between middle class and workers, more furnishings in a house, etc. There's a shift of income. Earning work in a factory rather than in the home. The family is now dominated by housekeeping, not production. Declining birth rate came about from a deliberate effort to limit family size. Speaking of which, women have had very little rights in American society. They are strongly discouraged against pursuing higher education. All family members play roles in generating family income. There was an emerging view of women as guardians of domestic virtues in keeping the home. Cult of domesticity. In some ways, women are superior to the man. Unmarried females had opportunities for careers that emphasized women's virtues for income. Domestic service is a frequent source of female employment. The rare vacation days that people do get, the holidays become very important. Public leisure, such as theatres, sports, circuses, public spectacles, such as the bizarre and the fantastic. People wanted to see things that amazed and frightened them. P.T. Barnum, with his famous circus with freak show aspects, also engaging lecturers in his shows. The agricultural north? It's not just the south that's agricultural. In the northeast, agriculture is on the decline. Many moved to the west for better land. There was an expansion of the dairy and hay industries. In the northwest, industry sold agriculture or agricultural products. Farming was a lucrative and expanding activity because of the land and steadily rising farm prices. There was a strong economic relationship between the Northeast and the West. New varieties of seed and better breeds, improved tools and farm machines, automatic reaper by Cyrus McCormick, thresher, which separated the grain from the wheat stalks. Religion drew farm communities together, and they had less contact with the popular culture and public social life than in cities. Next time we shall discuss the South and slavery. Hope you enjoyed my little accent there. Adios.